the snapshot of the market overall is when you look at total sales volume for the 6-month period of this year and you compare it to the 6-month period of last year, volume is up 91%. The total number of units sold is up 99%, and then the number of transactions is up 86%. So obviously when you look at those numbers and you conclude everything's up 100% from where it was at this same point last year, looks like the market's doing phenomenal. But let me just put a little bit of perspective to that. When you look at last year's numbers, we were at about 96 million in sales for last year, and now we're looking at about 182 million for the first 6 months of this year. So it's a dramatic increase. But to bring the perspective to it, if you go back and you look at 2015, the sales were about 173 million for that same period. So, you know, these mid-year statistics can be up and down. The market's doing very well, but when you look at, like for instance, the end of 2016, the market did about 300 million in sales for that period of time. So you can see if you compare against the mid-year to even 2016 numbers, the market's doing exceptionally well.
But there's still good demand, and it's outside dollars still coming in, correct?
Correct. So that kind of brings a little bit of perspective to the numbers are doing great, but I really kind of view it last year dipped a little bit in terms of what it did in 2015, but let's look at what's selling, because I think that's probably the biggest part of the story. When you look at, or the report rather, when you look at the sales activity that's occurring, 23 of the 26 sales, 88% were in the 1970s vintage properties. 8 of those 23 sales averaged 37,000 per unit, and then another 5 of those were at 50,000 a unit or above. So clearly the older vintage properties are outperforming the rest of the market in terms of investor interest.
Now, are these still value add deals for the most part? Isn't everything fixed by now?
Well, no. In fact, there's still that element of value add really plays a role in all of these sales to some extent, because you're getting a lot of investors coming in from other markets, California, Texas, where those markets have really exploded, and they're coming in here and they're looking at these value add. And I think that's why we've seen so many of these transactions occur in the 1970s type properties, because they view those now as properties where you can put dollars into them to improve them, hopefully increase rents, but provide a better environment for the tenant. For the tenant. So I think that in some respect, there's always a value add play. In fact, even one that I mentioned in my report, a property in Norman at 86,000 a unit that it sold for, that was still considered a value add. So
is that the surprise? Is that the surprise transaction?
That's the surprise transaction.
And what was it again? Which one? And what do you think happened?
That's a surprise transaction in this respect. It was called the Reserve at Norman, student housing property close to the university. But when you look at the 10-year history on that property, what it sold for when the developer originally sold it and what it sold for now, it was like a 42% drop in value, which is not something that anybody likes to see values go down, but in that case it did. Now, I don't know if that indicates any type of trend. Probably not. I don't know, but certainly it happened. When you look at the just the basic numbers of it, the value of the property went down.
Now let me ask you one question here, and then let's wrap up. You said the oil business hasn't had the effect that people assumed that it would have. I mean, the decline in prices, it had an effect across the economy, but what did and did it not do to the apartment market?
It hasn't. We've not seen the effect on the apartment market. Construction has still gone very strong. Occupancies have still held steady. Rents haven't gone down. I think the one thing that we're starting to see more of now, but I don't think this is really related to the oil industry is there's more concessions coming into the market. There's more free rent. There's, when you just drive around town, you see more of those signs on properties. But I think that's more of an effect of just more inventory coming on the market as opposed to any effects of the oil industry. We just really have not seen it in any type of big impact on the apartment
Now,
market.
concessions don't always necessarily mean the market's soft, do they? Can it just mean good competition? I mean, we've got
Well,
lots
I
of new
think
stuff
that-
and then lots of this older stuff that's been improved. I mean, we've got a good competition for
I think
your
that's
renter.
exactly right. Yeah, I think that when you see more concessions in the market, it does. It just means properties are competing. There's more inventory on the market, and I think that's where in my report I talk about lingering uncertainty. I think that's probably one of those areas when you look at pockets of overbuilding. Certainly no one can dispute that downtown, for instance, has a lot of new construction coming on. Concessions, occupancy, upward movement in interest rates, all those things are going to play a factor, which kind of fall into that lingering uncertainty. We don't really know yet what the effects of all that's going to happen, the added inventory to these pockets of the market. So
Now talking about that right there, tell me where we are now and where we are relative to the closest pocket of boom. construction.
Well, I think right now, and really this was more of a courtesy than anything, is that Case Properties allowed us to set and enjoy the air conditioning and the nice facilities they have here at Mission Point Apartments and more. They've done a fabulous job, and I think it just represents
And a second
that-
phase coming up.
There's second phase, and I think it just represents that side of the construction market. This pocket, more South Oklahoma City, North Norman, they've had a lot of new construction in this pocket. You look at Norman, they've had a lot of new construction, downtown Oklahoma City. So it's isolated to pockets, but I think within those pockets is what we've seen more concessions. But again, it's because of the added competition within these markets.